So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. So I'm going to be doing something a little different in this video. I'm building some solar thermal curtains to go up into my windows. Now the purpose of these things will be to absorb sunlight and convert it into heat to help offset the heating in my home. So I have this material. This is what they call IR flock sheet. This is the darkest material available to man in a fabric. So this fabric absorbs 99.7, I believe it is, percent of all visible and infrared light and converts it into heat. So when I hang this up as a curtain, there's a bit of dust on it and stuff, but when I hang this material up as a curtain in my windows, it'll absorb the sunlight, convert it into heat, and help warm my house so I can cut down on my heating costs. So the thinking of my plan is really, I'm going to roll this out to the lengths that I need for the next window that I plan on doing. I've already done one before I recorded this video, but I'm going to need 31 inches of fabric to fill the window. So I'll cut angles here and I'll kind of pick off the little bits of dust off camera and get those all hopefully out of the way. And I'll start to move ahead with the process, yeah? Okay, so I just got my measuring tape here. Take it out to just past 3 foot, and that way I can kind of have enough room to work with. Just roll that back a bit, have a bit of slack. So from the end of the fabric, I'm just going to come in 31 inches. And I know there's probably people that are tailors and that kind of stuff to be like, oh yeah, you know, you're not doing that right and blah blah blah. I'm not the most expert tailor in the world, or sewer in the world, if you will. So either way, I know this is a simple process and I'll be able to get it done fairly easily. So I put 31-inch marker on that side with just a bit of masking tape. Do the same down on this end now, where I just want to make sure that I'm sitting at the right point on the fabric. Can't find the end of my tape now. Oh, there we go. So I'm simply just going to tear off little tiny pieces, really. And I'm just using it as a marker spot where, yeah, like I say, pretty well at the end there. Come up to the 31-inch mark. Just mark that off. So it's pretty simple now. I've got my 2 points that I'm going to go out to. This stuff is so sensitive. Even a bit of the dust and stuff on your hands, I'll have to go through and clean that off again, but before I hang them. But you can see even the dust from your fingers on it because it's so dark and so black. Any imperfection on it can easily be seen, if you will. So I'm going to just take this and hook it on down on this end. I'll put that right where the edge of the marker is. And I'm going to come straight across, put it right where the edge of the marker is on this side. And like I said, I know this isn't absolutely perfect and blah blah blah, but to me it does the job. And really, I'm looking for more functional ability out of this thing than I am anything else. So I'm simply just going to grab my scissors and cut along this line as clean and straight as I can. Now, within reason, this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I mean, it always looks nicer the cleaner you get the lines and everything else, but you'll see when it's hanging up in the window that it really doesn't make that substantial of a difference if the line's not absolutely 100%, you know, perfect and that kind of thing. I'll just peel that back a bit. Now when I bought this stuff, I bought about, I think it was 4 meters of it, and it cost about $200 to give you an idea of how much you get versus the cost. This stuff isn't the cheapest material in the world to buy, but given its thermal properties, it's unmatched from my perspective. I had an old solar cooker that I did a video on a few years ago, and I did a quasi-detailed video of exactly how that was done. So now that I've got my line cut, I'm just going to take all this masking tape back off again. Like I say, it was really just to give me a bit of bearing of how long this thing needed to be. But yeah, as I was saying, a few years back, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, I did a video on the old solar cooker that I built, and that's been sitting in my window for years. But it relies on solar panels and a fan and that type of thing. I'll probably show a quick snap of it later on in the video. But hopefully this replaces, well, from the testing I've done with the first one I hung in the window, it should, but hopefully this ends up replacing the need to have solar panels driving a fan for the old solar heater, air heater that I had up in the window and that kind of thing. But so I'll just stop at this point in time and kind of, I know my fabric's cut to the length I want it to be at now. I'll shift gears and move up to the sewing machine and move on to the next step, yeah? Okay, so I just aimed this with the dark side of the fabric facing downward. And I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up because it all looks pretty dark, but you can see that the facing side where the flock sheet is on is significantly darker than the back side of things. But what I'm going to end up using is bamboo to hang these inside the window set, or the windowsill, sorry. So the thinking really is going to be, the edge I cut is along here. So I know I've got nice clean edges along the ends where they're simply going to get rolled over onto themselves, where I know I've got enough room for that bamboo to feed through. And I'm just going to take a couple pins to set this in place, if you will. So, and really there's nothing fancy in this regard about kind of moving forward. I want to make sure there's a bit of slack. I want them to be, you know, fairly firm, but I still want a bit of slack so that the bamboo can go in and out easy enough. So I'm just going to pop a pin there. In fact, I'll even roll it up a bit, because the more material I have facing the sun, the better off you are, right? So I'll just set the first pin in. I'm going to do the same down on the other end now. And to give you an idea, there's a bit of room for this bamboo, but I'm not going to be sewing right up to where the pin is. I'm going to be sewing on where the edging is on the fabric. I'm going to sew that to itself. So I will have a little bit more room than it does appear initially, but I'll just shift down to the other end, if you will, and put my pin in that place. And these are really just temporary holders. They're not meant to be permanent placements. And I know I'm using safety pins, and like I say, the sewing people out there are probably rolling their eyes at me, but I'm more of a do-it-yourself, self-reliance kind of guy than I am a, you know, expert sewing machine user, tailor, whatever you want to call those people. But either way, to me, this kludgery that I'm doing is effective and works. Like I said, I've already tried it in one window, and I've already tested the results before I turned around and started making a full video on all of this stuff. When I saw how effective it truly was, I kind of shifted gears and thought I'd do this as a full video. But that's pretty well as simple as that. I'll end up sliding the bamboo out, and now I know roughly where exactly my line's going to go, and it's going to give me enough room to feed that bamboo through and that kind of thing. So the next step will be just to sew this line along here. So I've got my sewing machine here. I'll shift camera angles and kind of reorganize things so that I'm in a better place to do the actual sewing. And then I'll just get this line seamed off or sewn off, I guess. So give me 2 more seconds. Yeah. So my sewing machine is all set up with the threads and that kind of thing. Now, if you don't know how to set up a sewing machine, there's tons of tutorials on that on the internet, but I enjoy having the skill set of being able to do that. Where, if you've seen previous videos of mine, there's a walled tent that I built about, it's about 5 years ago now. And really I brushed up to speed on my sewing skills when I built that thing out. So I don't, like I say, I don't consider myself to be an expert in these things, but such is life, right? So I'm just going to set in my fabric, set down my foot, pull out my pin. I'm just going to set that in, because I'm getting old, I got to throw on the glasses. So I'm just going to sew a few forward lines, and then a back, and then forward again. And this is really a fairly simple process. Definitely nothing complicated here. I don't need to make this a fancy sewing job or anything else. I just have to keep it that there's a good line of thread supporting these curtains to hang from the bamboo rod, if you will. So as I come up to the second pin, I'll just pull that out now. And keep moving forward. And then I'll just finish off this seam line. When I get up to this end, I'll take out this pin as well. Just make sure my needle's in before I take the pin out. And I want to come right out to the edge here. And then I want to back step it. And then come forward again. That just locks the stitch. I always like to do kind of a little bit extra. Pop the foot up, pull it out, and grab my scissors and just snip the excess off. So I'll clean up the loose threads that are on here, but in essence I now have my loop where I can feed my bamboo rod through. So I'll cut angles here and I'll shift to the next. So now the next step, just make sure everything kind of went smoothly. I'll just, here, chair's in the way. I'll just test that my bamboo goes in without issue. And it is a fairly snug fit because I don't want to waste this material as much as possible, given the cost of it. But either way, the bamboo sits in nicely like that. So, and as you can see, I've got a fair amount of bamboo. So I'll end up cutting this bamboo to the exact length I need when I go to hang these up. And that'll be part of one of the next steps in the video. But I've got a second window that I plan on putting up some of this material into. And so I've got to do this exact same process a second time, yeah? So I'm simply going to walk through the exact same process the second time, where I just want to set my measuring tape out to get my distance. Make sure I'm firm to the edge. Just take a small piece, and I use the flat side of the tape, because you know when you rip it, it could be off. So just use the flat side to turn around and say, yeah, I want that to be exactly there. Do the same on the other side. Oh, help if I remembered the measuring tape, wouldn't it? Do the exact same thing on this side. Just make sure I'm flush on this end. Like I say, peel off a bit. If the camera ends up picking up a bit of noise in the background, it's fairly early in the morning. My kids are just starting to get up and get their day going because it's the weekend and all that happiness. So I'll just set that there. It gives me my points, if you will, that I want to run from and to. And I'll do the exact same thing I did before. I'll just set that down on there, and then run that straight across to the edge of the tape on this side. That should give me a pretty straight line, I would think. There we go. And we'll just cut this now. Just so I can get into it easier. And ideally, I'd rather have the scissors just run the line than actually do the cutting. It makes for cleaner edges, but sometimes the scissors just don't catch. There we go. And like I said, they're not perfectly straight lines, nor do they need to be. So I've got additional of this fabric because I probably won't put it in the video, but I've got some additional south-facing windows that sit up in my bedrooms up on the second floor, and I plan on putting some of these solar curtains up into them as well. I'm lucky where I'm at in the location I'm in. I have a lot of south-facing windows with good sun exposure, so it allows me to do these types of things. You know, if you put this up in a northern window, obviously you're not going to see any performance. And if you put it in an eastern or western window, you're only going to see either, you know, morning or afternoon sun. So if you decide to do anything like this, be mindful of kind of your placement of these in relationship to the sun. You definitely want to have the sun shining directly on these for as long as possible. But this IR flock sheet is very, very efficient. To give you an idea, I'll speak in Celsius now. I'm sorry for my American friends. If my translation or temperature change in temperatures isn't perfect, but for Celsius, say this room was 18 degrees Celsius. This fabric in a matter of seconds will reach up to about 45 degrees Celsius in say 10-15 seconds with direct sunlight shining on it. It's very, very rapid when it comes to the increase of temperature. And after being in the sun for even just a couple minutes, if there's good sun intensity, I'll easily see this climb well above 50 degrees Celsius. And this material is rated to go well above that. So for Fahrenheit, to give you an idea, I'm talking about jumping from, and I'm ballparking because I'm not an expert in Fahrenheit, but jumping from about 65 degrees Fahrenheit up to about 115 Fahrenheit in a matter of 10-15 seconds. And that potentially it'll reach up closer to about 140 degree Fahrenheit when it gets into its peak temperatures. I could be off by a couple degrees because I'm more proficient in Celsius than I am in Fahrenheit. But I've got a meter either way that when we hang these up and the sun starts shining on them, I'll just show you by the metering. But I'm going to go off and walk through that exact process I did with the first curtain that I made, and just do the fold and line so that the bamboo can feed through. Yeah, I'll make that the next part of the video. And go through the exact same process again, where I face the dark side down, so I can just roll that over, put in a couple pins to keep everything good. And if I see after I take out the bamboo stick that the pins are significantly off in width from each other, I'll just go back and adjust them to make sure that they're pretty even. I don't want to have it when it's hanging in the window that it's hanging by a weird angle or anything. And that shouldn't happen, but I'll just make sure everything's fairly straight in that regard. So like I say, I'll just put in the third pin as a kind of guide. There we go. And then just slide the bamboo out. This one's a bit firmer. And it won't be that way, like I say, when sorry, I'll just set that to the side. So, and I'll just make sure it seems like it's fairly even. Yeah, it might be a little bit high on this side, so I'll just bring that back a tiny bit and reset it. And there we have it. I'm ready to move on to the sewing. So just like before, I'll shift angles and get the sewing machine going again. Yeah. Just make sure the machine's on. Threads are all feeding through, still no issues. And like I say, it's just on that finishing edge that they put on the fabric that I'm actually gonna set my stitch. Just give it a bit of slack. Put down my foot. Okay, so while the needle's in, I can pull out my pin. And I come forward a few stitches. Now there's a little switch where I can back stitch, and then it just stitches backwards, if you will. So I just want to make sure that the back stitching is set, and that way the thread doesn't come loose later. Make sure the needle's in, pull out my pin, keep everything nice and straight. In fact, I'll loosen that off just so I can bring it that way a bit. Pop out that last pin. Do the back stitching. And I'll see that is done. I'll pull out my thread. I'll just grab my scissors here. Snip off that thread. I'll clean that up with a lighter. Just burn off the little frayed ends. And I'll stick it on the bamboo pole as the next step, and I should have two of them ready to roll. And just as I did with the other one, I'll just take my bamboo stick, feed that through, make sure it all fits properly and all that happiness. No issues in that regard. Okay, and I've got my two curtains ready. I'll just set that up and put it with the other one. Now, unfortunately, I have a pantry that's in the way of the windows I want to hang these in, so I'm going to have to stop in the video. I'm not going to bother putting it into the video, but I've got to pull all the food off the shelves of the pantry, move the pantry out, and then just clear away so I can get in to hang these up, yeah? So I'll do that off camera, and then I'll cut back when I'm ready to actually install these in the windows. All right, got all the food off the pantry shelves. Just got to move the shelves out of the way and get access to the windows there. It's one of the reasons why I don't mind doing these windows either, even though it's going to throw a bit of warmth into this area. That's having the lack of light coming through these south-facing windows near my food. I imagine that the warmth coming off the windows probably won't be as bad as the light damage that would happen from the light impacting on the food, yeah? But either way, I'll pull these shelves out and clear out anything in the windows and get them ready to hang the curtains. Okay, so now my next step, and if you're wondering where I got the measurements for how wide the curtain would be, I went from outside so I didn't have to worry about moving all this stuff to begin with. But now for my next step, I want to see how long those bamboo curtains need to be. So I'm looking at 33 33.5 inches. That'll give me a little bit of nudge room on either side, and that's going off of this inside ledge on both sides. So I'll just check on this side as well. Yeah, 33.5 should do it. So now I'll go and cut both sections of the bamboo poles that I have for each curtain down to 33.5, yeah? Okay, so now this bamboo isn't really carrying a heavy load, so I'm gonna want to prefer the thinner bamboo versus the thicker stuff, just to keep the weight down, hanging in the window and all that. But got a little Sharpie, so I'll take that out. We'll go a little beyond the 33.5, but take that out and just measure the first. 33.5 is there, so I'll take it right there. I still give myself a little bit of wiggle room either way. Yeah, that should be fine. And now I'll just switch it over and do the next one. Make this one 33.5 as well. That's right there. Just double check that because, you know, measure twice, cut once. General theme. I think I even came a little shy on that. Maybe go over a little bit wider. That's fine. Okay, so let's just get those cut to length now. I've just got this little block here to help keep my line somewhat straight. It's not critical. This whole design is fairly elementary and flexible, really. So I'll make sure I'm lined up on my black line. There we go. One done. Let's just make sure those are pretty well to each other. Yeah, okay, we're good. Come on now. There we go. Not just good, it's good enough. Now, sweep up the bits. Do that off seam, but like I say, not much of a mess. Either way, I've got my two bamboo pieces that are to the length I need them to be. I'll just get my little dustpan and pick that up, and then I'm ready to move on to the next step. Yep. Okay, so I just laid my curtain back down with the dark side facing up. I'm gonna take one of these bamboo poles now that I've cut to the size I needed. Slide them back in. And should see a little bit of nub hanging out on both ends. It's exactly what I want to see. So I'll do the exact same to the next one, and then I'll get ready to do the install into the window itself, yeah? The exact same thing with the second one. Nothing complex here. We should see about an inch, maybe inch and a half sticking out both sides. Hopefully the camera's picking that up okay. Like I say, pretty simple. Nothing to it really. And now my curtains are fully ready to hang. Trying to keep this project simple and in a cheap budget as best I can. So I went to the dollar store and picked up 40 hair elastics. So I've got a pile of these bad boys. And I've got some command strips from 3M. These ones here are 3 pound strength or 1.3 kilograms. Should be ample to hold those curtains up into the window. So the thinking really is that I just want to attach these up and into those window sills like we were seeing, where I'm actually going to brace the bamboo. So I'll just put that on, peel that off, stick that onto the back of there. So now that's one set pretty well ready to go. In order to stick it to the wall, I just have to peel these off. But first order business, I'm going to take the curtains and hang them in the window to see where these should sit roughly, yeah? Okay, so now I'm just going to take my curtain, and as you can see, that bamboo sits in with just a little bit of about a ½ inch space. And I know that the bottom of the curtains, I want to have hanging that they're not touching the sill at all. I want them lifted up a bit because I want the air to be able to come in underneath, pass up through the chamber, and then come out and into the room. So when it comes to hanging these, I can tell that if I set them about here, just put a little mark there, and over on that side, it's pretty easy, it'll be about the same. And then about there. That lets me know where to put my command strips. So I'll shift gears, hang my command strips up, and get ready to actually put this up in the window. When I'm doing the bushcraft stuff, sometimes the camera angles can get a little funky, but such is life. So I'm just going to peel off the adhesive strip on the back of this. And now when it comes to this hanging, these hair elastics are going to sit on there and give me about another inch, inch and a half or so. So when it comes to my actual hang, I want that to be up a little bit higher, and I want that to be fairly close to the window because I don't really want to have a huge air gap. So I figure about there looks about right to me, because really this bottom sill line is almost perfect given the length of the curtain and everything else. So that should hang, give me a little bit of room. And now I'll do the same on the other side, yeah? I'll try to get this as best I can, but I just peel off that adhesive backing strip. And now I'm going to make sure that that squares up with the other side. It sits about an inch above that edge, so I'll set it about there. Looks pretty good. Hang on my little hair elastic piece. Now the way it's going to work is the bamboo pole is just going to hook right on that hair elastic and sit in the window. It's really going to be simple. The curtain, simply just hook it onto the hair elastics and it hangs in the window nicely. Just kind of straighten it out. Hopefully the camera's picking it up where there's a bit of light coming in underneath. It lets me know the airflow is able to come in and underneath this. And because I'm off from the wall a bit, the air flows up through here all along this channel where there's about an inch space. Now if I see that things don't look like they're even when it comes to how I've cut and hung things, or if there's an issue in that regard, it's easy enough to turn around and take these hair elastics, just pop them off, do an extra wrap on there, and it lifts it up a bit where I just set it back onto the hook again, and it would lift up that side by say a quarter inch or so. With the way that I've done it, everything's fine, so I don't really need to do that. It can hang like it is nicely. And now I'll do the exact same thing with the next curtain into this window, yeah? Now hanging the second one should be a bit easier because, I mean, not that the first one was complicated at all, but I already know where I'm gonna hang these, so I just have to match up to where I put the place on that side. And that was about there. So I'll just set that in place, hang my hair elastic loop on there, and do the same on this other side now, where you say I want to be about an inch, inch and a half above this top level seam here. That seems to be about right. And I'll just put that one on. Really simple. And these are command strips, so you know they can be pulled off easy enough. And that's one of the things I like about using this like hair elastic and stuff. In the summertime, if it was getting really hot and I wanted to pop these curtains out of the window. I don't feel like I need to, given the way that my overhang is and the way the sun sits here. In the summertime, the sun's higher in the sky and doesn't really shine on these, whereas in the wintertime the sun drops lower in the sky and shines directly on this surface. So, you know, it's optimized in that regard. But I still have the windows above that will let some light into this region, so it won't be totally dark. But it's easy enough to just pop these hair elastics off to pull these curtains out of the window. I intentionally made it to be this way, to be super simple to install and remove them at will, depending on the climate that I'm in. Just like I did in the first window, the exact same process. I simply just slide that bamboo rod onto that hair elastic and let it hang there, and then do the same on the other side, and boom, I'm on. Now I've got a little bit of airflow down through here, and the light lets me know that the airflow is kind of moving underneath, up and through. So now as the sun shines on this, in a little bit later in the day here, as the sun shines on this, this will start to warm up, and I'll be able to put the temperature gauge against it and show you exactly what the temperature is, yeah? So then I just kind of pulled the camera back here a little bit so you guys could see that the top panes of the windows, I can still open the window on the left there and let some airflow in if need be. But really this substantially will help darken out the pantry. When I put the shelving back into that area, I'll close these blinds, and I won't close them all the way, but you know, so the air can still flow, but I'll close the better part of them so that you don't even see these curtains hanging in the window. They'll just be there. And then the light will still be able to shine in through those upper windows so that this area doesn't become too dark or anything. But to give you an idea of the efficiency of these curtains when the sun shines directly onto them, you're looking at about 600 watts per meter square. From my calculations, when I worked out all the math of things, the efficiency of these would be about the equivalent of a 600 watt heater, you know, electric baseboard heater, which aren't the most efficient things in the world, but these would produce about the same amount of heat as a 600 watt heater per 1 meter squared. So, you know, roughly, to speak in imperial measurements, roughly 3 foot square or a yard square. You know, that gives you an idea of kind of how much energy these things will produce. So now because they're totally passive, they just sit into the window. There's no more work that'll need to be done to them. They'll just passively create heat and warm the space inside my home. And because I have so much south-facing windows, it gets extremely bright in here one way or the other. So I don't really mind cutting down some of these windows and having them generate heat for me instead, because it was already really, really bright. But that's about it for these curtains. I'll show you what they look like from the outside. They're not, you know, by no means an eyesore or anything. And it may look like you can see a bit of light kind of shining in on the side of the curtain there. Let me see. Yeah, you'll see a bit of light shining in here. The fabric is really just kind of curled in on the sides a bit. As we go through time, this fabric will flatten itself out and kind of settle. It's just instinctively wanting to pull into itself. It's the nature of how the fabric hangs. But I saw that with the first curtain I hung up, where it does kind of straighten itself out and just want to hang as flat as can be as we move through time. So, needless to say, I'll stop here for a minute. I know the sun isn't fully on these windows yet, and I'll grab my temperature gauge and I'll show you the temperature increase. So first order business, while the sun isn't directly shining on them, I'll go and grab my temperature gauge and I'll show you guys what that is in Celsius and Fahrenheit as kind of the ambient temperature in the room. And then when the sun does shine on them directly, I'll show you the temperatures that they're reaching, yeah? And then like I say, I've got a temperature meter here where I can adjust between Celsius and Fahrenheit. So I'll try to catch this on camera as cleanly as possible, but I pull the trigger, lights up, tells me it's 20 degrees Celsius. And then for Fahrenheit, 67.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is without any sunlight shining on it at all. This is just purely it sitting in the ambient temperature of the room, yeah? And it'll be pretty well the same. I don't know if the laser is getting picked up here. Hopefully the camera's picking that up, but I can move the laser pointer around and I can see it's within reason a fairly consistent 19 degrees and change, yeah? So there isn't huge temperature swings in that fabric. I'm trying to make this happen on the camera as cleanly as possible. And then, like I say, I'll show you this material when the sun's shining on it, and you'll be able to see the temperature differential that's achieved, yeah? So now here's a view from the outside of, like I say, I'm still relatively early in the day, so I know the sun's not gonna fully shine on this location for a little bit. So either way, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of from the outside. As you can see, they just look like blackened windows. They're very, very unnoticeable. You know, if you were walking by, you might not even notice that these things are hanging in the window. They're very, very low key in that regard. And like I say, they stop 99.7% of all light, you know, visible and infrared. So, you know, even if there's light shining on the inside, you're not going to see it one way or the other. It really is just like a pure black-bodied surface that'll radiate, you know. So I'll leave it at this point in time, and when the sun kind of swings around a little further, I'll show its impact on these to show you the temperature performance that I'm seeing in my other window. I just didn't show you that because all the food I pulled off my pantry shelves is now sitting in between that and the other curtain, so I can't show you that without stepping across a pile of food. You know, it's just the nature of how I've been going about doing this build. But either way, it gives you an idea of how low-key and simple these builds are. And like I say, this material is IR flock sheet. It really is probably the blackest material known to man, and its ability to absorb light and turn it into heat, in my mind, for not being a metal, it's unmatched. I haven't seen anything perform as rapidly as this material has. To do a 20 degrees Celsius jump in a matter of 10 to 15 seconds, I don't even see that performance when I'm using aluminum or copper. It just doesn't heat up that rapidly, you know. So this is good in that regard, where say there's clouds moving through where you get intermittent sun. As soon as the sun shines on this, within seconds it'll be producing ambient heat into the room, and if the clouds move on, that heat will just dissipate out of the material. But this material can easily reach above 200 degrees Celsius, so I don't have to worry about it melting or off-gassing or anything like that. To give you an idea, I think that's closer to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and don't quote me on that, but somewhere up around that range. So this material can handle high temperatures without any issues whatsoever. It's really, you know, it's designed to handle it, and it doesn't have a melting point, and it doesn't have a, you know, a fire point where it's just going to burst into flames or anything. So having these types of things in your windows are totally, in my mind, 100% safe. There's no risk or issue in any regard in that way. And like I say, when the sun swings around a bit further, I'll show you the performance. I decided to go a little bit guerrilla style and show you the one that's hanging in this window, kind of behind my television. As you can see, it's reaching over 50 degrees Celsius. Switch that to Fahrenheit. It's 121, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, 123, 26. So 52C. And you can see the better part of this entire surface, as long as you can see down here, when the sun's not shining on that area, because of the way that the building sits and everything else, it drops down to ambient again. But when you come up to, as soon as the sun's shining in these zones, the temperature just climbs and climbs. So this has already been heating my living room for the earlier part of the day, because the light shines on this one earlier hours of the day, and then it shines on the others later on. But switch it back to Fahrenheit. But you can see the temperature being put off by this thing is fairly significant. It's good enough to throw ambient warmth into the room, yeah? Like I say, it produces about the equivalent of a 600 watt heater, electric baseboard heater, for about the size of the one sitting in the window here. It's close to about a yard square / meter square. You know, I'm ballparking just to keep it simple. Okay, so it's a little bit later in the day, and if you've watched previous videos of mine, the solar panel sitting over there, but the solar thermal curtains are sitting in these windows here, and as you can see, the sun's just starting to shine on them now, where the one on the left is almost completely other than the bottom right hand corner there, and the one on the right is only about half, you know, exposed to the light. But as the sun moves further through the sky, it'll end up impacting on this area fully. And earlier in the year, you know, and in the spring, so spring and fall, the angle of the sun sits better, where these see light from about 10 in the morning all the way till about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So I get a good, 5 hours, if you will. In the wintertime, they get about 2.5, 3 hours just because of the buildings that are around me casting shadow and that kind of thing. But I'll go to the inside now. I'll just stop and show you as well I've got windows up on the top here, and those windows are south facing as well up in the bedrooms. I plan on installing some curtains. I'm not going to do it in this video, but I've got to install some curtains into those windows as well, where I'm going to take up half of the one on the right here, and I'm only going to take up 1 out of 4 of the window sections on the left here, and that way I can help heat the upstairs of the house as well. My primary objective with doing all of this is to cut my hydro bill in half. If my kids, which I can see she's left the window wide open, so I gotta go up and deal with that, but I'll go in and use that temperature gun on the inside now and show you the temperatures that it's performing off these. It should be around close to 50 Celsius, I would imagine. But yeah, I'll cut angles here and go in and show you that side of things, yeah? And just to show you guys, I'm sitting at over 20 degrees Celsius in my house. I don't have any of the heat on. The temperature outside is 11 degrees Celsius, and it's causing the temperature inside to become over 20. Okay, so like I say, I'm in the inside now, where I've set up the 2 curtains here, and as you can see, I'm producing over 50 degrees Celsius on a large portion of this window, and if it's not over 50, it's in the mid 40s. So, when you get up closer to the top as the heat rises, you can see the temperature climbs, and that's really where the warm air is vetting out. So I'll switch that to Fahrenheit. And as you can see, like I say, these are almost a yard square in surface, so they're definitely throwing off warmth. Now, if I'm 6 to 8 inches away from it, I can easily feel that warmth on my face, without question. It's this kind of gentle emanation of heat into the room. It's not blasting it in, it just warms up the entire area of even the zone I'm sitting in now. And you can see over on this side, hopefully the camera's still picking that okay, because this one isn't getting the light yet. The sun hasn't shone fully on it. It's got some warm spots, but it's not quite as hot. But it's still, 43 degrees Celsius. It's still emanating warmth into the room. And if I shine down to the lower section, you can see that's the ambient temperature of the room now is 19. In this section of the house, it was a bit cooler earlier. It was closer to about 16. So it's already brought the temperature of the room up by about 3 or 4 degrees. And the sun's only just shone on this area. So I'm expecting that after an hour or two's worth of time, the temperature should be up into the mid-20s. So I'm ballparking, like I say, I'm not the most savvy with the conversions, but I'm ballparking that to be in the mid-70s. And that heat will just emanate through the rest of the environment, yeah? So, like I say, I'll leave these 3 up for a couple days and just see exactly how much heat they're producing into the house and if it's enough. And if it's not, I'll end up doing the ones upstairs in the bedroom windows up there. They're really the prime windows as well. They see more sunlight in those windows than any other windows in my house, even though they're all south facing because of buildings and trees and other things around me. Those tend to be the prime solar windows in my home. So like I say, if this isn't adequate enough to really help offset the heat of the house, right now, these 3 curtains, because I've got the one hanging up in the other room there, these 3 curtains are roughly about a yard each. So I'm ballparking that every hour of sunlight that's shining on this, I'm producing about 2.5 kilowatts worth of heat into my home. The average house uses about, in the climate I'm in, uses about 25 kilowatts a day. So if I'm producing 2.5 kilowatts just off these, and that's for 4 hours a day, I'm getting up to being able to produce, a quarter to a third of my heating costs just off of these 3 curtains. Like I say, this fabric cost me $200 in material to buy. I had to order it from Japan because that's where it gets made. And the bamboo was about 12 bucks for a set of 6 just from the hardware store. And I grabbed the command strips and the hair elastics for a couple bucks each, and they were at the dollar store, so they were only dirt cheap. Of this whole project has cost me less than $250 to do, but I believe that the substantial savings I'll see over the year should easily see these things pay for themselves within the first couple months. So I'm going to start to wrap up this video at this point in time. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. So, and just as a kind of last comment, you can see I put the shelves back. When I stack the food back onto this again, you wouldn't even notice that it was there. So it's quietly just kind of sitting in the background doing its work, right? And hopefully this should last for years and years with no maintenance or no upkeep. I don't know of a cheaper, better alternative to cut down on your power needs to heat your home than the IR flock sheet technology. To me, it really is unsurpassed in the amount of energy it can produce versus the amount of sunlight that it needs to capture to create the heat. You know, to turn around and have it where the sun is shining on a surface, normally it's anywhere from 1,000 to about 1,300 watts per meter square. The only thing that's really slowing the efficiency of this turning sunlight into heat is the fact that I have double pane windows. The light that gets cut off from shining through the window, you know, even though it seems like it's bright and fully shining in the window, the amount of solar energy that the double pane glass itself stops is really the biggest drop in efficiency when it comes to this technology. It's kind of a weird thing, but if the windows were only a thin single pane, which is kind of counterintuitive to keeping the heat in your house, but if they were older single pane windows, they would actually perform better than the more modern windows would when using this type of technology. Yeah, like I say, I really hope you enjoy this type of content. I've got lots of future videos coming. Right now I'm working with a monster USB solar powered battery generator. I'm just testing that right now to ensure that its performance is really kind of unmatched. But yeah, that should be an interesting video. Hopefully I'll have that out in the near term as well. I know I do go some periods of time without publishing a video. I'm a single parent. Sometimes things get busy and I just don't have the time. But rest assured, I do have lots of projects in the pipeline that I want to be doing videos on. It's just getting the time to do them. And like I said, if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And once again, thanks for watching, yeah?